Hello and welcome back to the Herbal Entrepreneur Conference. I'm Yolanda Joy, and in this session, we are going to be talking about how you can develop sustainable pillars for your herbal business. And this is a session that really is applicable to herbalists across the board, whether you're teaching classes, making products, or seeing clients in practice. Because for this session, we are bringing on Selima Houston-Lust, who does all of these things as a clinical herbalist, spiritual teacher, and co-founder of Iwilla Remedy. Selima, I'm so glad that you can join us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor. It's a joy. I'm really excited to share. And these are some of my favorite things to talk about.
Yes, I'm right there with you with that. I love talking about all of the things that we talk about at the Herbal Entrepreneur Conference. And I'm so excited to learn more about you and what you've done as an herbalist over the years. Perhaps before we get started, you could tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and how you got where you're at today.
I would love to share. So, as you already mentioned, I'm a clinical herbalist, and I've been doing this work since around 2012. And this was not my plan. My plan was actually to be in music and in arts administration and in the arts. And my background is heavily in the arts and in marketing and communication in the arts. But through my own healing journey, healing process, and crisis, I landed inside of this wonderful world of herbalism, plant medicine. And after doing my training and really um, going through my own healing journey and process, I just never stopped. And so it developed and blossomed into what is now this business that I have with my wife and business partner, Tammy. And we just continue to expand it because obviously, we really love the work. And we also really believe that herbal medicine fills a really important need for people. And of course, physically, but also emotionally and spiritually as well. So we do so much because there's so many different touch points. So yes, we do consultations. Yes, we have mini courses into a big mentorship program. Yes, we also have an apothecary with product, and I'm writing books because there's so many ways in which people can enter into their healing journey. And we want people to know that they have options with their care and that herbal medicine should never be discounted. But like all the people here already know that.
Yes, I absolutely agree. I think that is really important. And it's great to get a snapshot into who you are and all of those different little pieces that come into what you do and how you can bring your plant magic out into the world as well, because there are so many different ways to do that. So today's session is about those developing the pillars for your herbal business, and especially for sustainability. So I think it would be nice to start with a bit of a discussion on sustainability and why that's so important for herbalists, and in particular in the way that we run our businesses. So yeah, what are your thoughts on sustainability as a whole for herbal businesses?
So I want to differentiate. Are we talking about environmental sustainability or are we talking about business sustainability? Because we can go both ways.
Well, yeah, I did leave that open-ended on purpose because honestly, they are different, first of all, and both important because, yeah, sustainability, I believe from an ethical standpoint that herbalists should most definitely keep environmental sustainability at the forefront in every business decision that we do. However, it's also important that we can run our businesses sustainably over time so that we can actually continue to get our work out there in a ongoing way, because we need to do that if we want to be profitable as well. So I would actually like it if you could answer that question in twofold. So the sustain both ways.
Great. So I'll start with the thing that I did for myself. When I was leaving the arts, I just made the declaration, I'm never going back. I made this declaration, I am never going back to work for someone else. And underneath that, I really did set this intention to have a sustainable and, of course, fulfilling and profitable business. And I think it's because I don't think we are going into business thinking like, oh, I'm just going to close in 2 years. I'm just going to close in 5 years and 10 years. It's like, no, herbalists are anchors in the community. Like we are an integral part of community care, and we need to build the structures of our business so that we can be sustained because people do rely on us. We feel a really important need in medicine and in care and in nourishment and in dietary practices, like all the ways in which we fill the gaps of what people are not getting with modern medicine. And so we, in addition to being excellent or striving for excellence as practitioners, we have to develop the structures within our business so that we can continue to do that, so that there is longevity and that we also feel like we are, compensated for what we do, so that we are also able to support our families and save and do all of the things. And it's really important, particularly in our industry and in the United States, where herbal medicine is not a licensed medical field, right? So we can't come out of school and go to residency. We can't come out of school and go to Indeed or LinkedIn and type in herbalist and find hundreds of jobs. It's like that's not an option for us. So we have to, it's very entrepreneurial. So we have to build these different pillars and these different structures. And that's why our output is so tremendous. I think that's why people see like, oh, this person does this and they do this and they do this. I do all these things too. Our output has to be pretty massive so that, again, people have different touch points. And we anchor into like the promise that we fulfill is, which is a big need in like community care. So we are pillars in the community, but we have to build the pillars for our business as well. And then in terms of our sustainable practices as it relates to the environment, that's important. Of course, that's important. It's like we are the plant people. So we are deeply in relationship with the natural world. And I feel like we should be examples of what it means to have reciprocal relationships and respectful relationships with the planet. I think that our consumerism mindsets and capitalism always, as consumers, we're always thinking, well, how can I get more for less? But we as herbalists, we have to check that. And so some of the things that we do, like in our own apothecaries, that we actually don't sell bulk. We encourage people to buy by the ounce because people are looking for that, like, I want the cheapest price and I want the most. But as an herbalist, I'm like, if this is your introduction to this plant, you don't know if you need it yet. You don't know if it's in alignment with your constitution. You don't know how you're going to respond to it. So you don't need a pound. So you only need an ounce. So try it, get to know it. So it's like there's practices that we can put in place to help manage some of the sustainability and also explain that to our customers. So when people come in and they're like, I want more. And I'll like question that. Well, why do you think you need more when this is the first time that you're trying it? And also, I think we have to think about our economic impact with where we source our herbs from and where we buy from, because there's a thread. And like that's something that I think people need to consider, because it's not just let me get the most for the least. And of course, in like our environment, our climate, our planet is speaking to us, and we need to listen. Like it's not a question about climate change.
Yeah, I think that's really important because we're living in a world where we are literally seeing the results on a day-by-day basis. And we do need to respond if we want to continue being stewards of the plants and just getting our allowing the plants to speak for themselves as well is really important. And that's key, just following the what we're seeing in the world and bringing that back. Yeah, absolutely. The other part that comes out of this is really the sustainability part for the business. So like really how to strengthen up the way that, like, I love that you said that herbalists need to be entrepreneurial, because that is very true in that there's not a lot of jobs, and you often do need to create a job for yourself as an herbalist. That's kind of the way it works. And so we are needing to actually build something ourselves, and those pillars that come into that to actually keep it going and over the long term as a sustainable business. And so what do you think are those important pillars that we need to focus on when we are building what we want to build as an herbalist?
Yeah, I was zooming out and thinking about this, and I think it's being the CEO, which is and focusing on the CEO, which is community, um, education, and operations. So no business exists without people. like, and people are not just. We don't need to just think of them in terms of a transaction, that they're just clients and they're just customers and they're just followers. But it's like, no, this is your community. These are the people who you are making a positive impact on your life. You're revealing to them new possibilities about their care. And even if we don't always see or hear, we're never going to hear from every single person that follows us. But we have to trust that the connection is being made in our output, in our being forward and front and center in our businesses and how we share our messages, because we will get messages from people who have been following us for 7 years. We may get a thank you that says like, you put this piece up or you made this medicine and this is how it helped me. And so I really want people to not just measure like the number of followers or how many clients that you see or how many customers come through the door and how many sales are made that day. That's important, but actually none of that happens if you're not building trusting relationships with people on this, like on this planet. Like we are people and we serve a really great need, as I've been saying. And one of the things that we need to remember is that it's like a web in my mind's eye. It's like a web when we are being seen in our work and in this really important and rare calling. There's this web of which like you can't see all of the people that you are impacting. And that's okay, right? Like you're not going to be able to see it, but trust that it's making a really big impact. And if you have the heart of knowing like this is about community care, trust that that is happening. And then the other pillar, and well, I don't know if we want to go into tactics of community too, but that's like you also need people, in your orbit, and you can do lead magnets and you can do, of course, you do your content. So that's like going into our education. I think that we, in this age of social media, people can really diminish the impact of content. And I don't think of it as just content. I'm like, this is education. Our social media platforms, this is a part of our classroom. And so if I'm reading something and it sparks me or it's exciting to me or I just made a new connection, why wouldn't I share that with someone else? And so in our education, so many people, like if we're following each other, which many of like the speakers we kind of think like, oh my gosh, everybody knows this stuff. And it's like, no, we are a small group of people who love plants, who see the benefit of how being in relationship with plants can literally change our whole lives. And we need to share that and we educate. So many people don't know that they have other options. And so every time you share something that you've learned, you are educating someone. And sometimes it's from scratch. Like if people are going from the sad American diet and the chronic illnesses that are inevitable with it, and they're wanting to change their life, like don't skip steps, like really break it down for them for how they can do that and how they can utilize plants. Because again, we are a small group, small precious group, but most of the world, many people in the world like need the information. And so if you've been called to this work, think of how you share your messaging and how you share this work as your classroom, no matter what outlet that you do it in. And then the other thing is operations. So I think it's very easy to kind of focus on the immediate need of whether you're doing consultations or selling products or you're writing books of like, I need sales today, right? Like it's easy to just be focused on like today and not think about the day that can come when you are able to step away and who can step in and perform some of these tasks that you no longer need to be performing. And so one strong piece of that is having standard operating procedures. How do you do something as basic as shipping your products, right? If you're a manufacturer and if you're selling herbal products, can someone come in, look at the instructions and follow it in the exact same way that you do, and that package arrived not broken. And so it's like really thinking about all of those. And my wife is so good at this. She comes up with systems for everything, and it saves time. It saves a lot of time. We're able to ask for help. We're able to put people in roles. And reduce some of the friction of training because we have standard operating procedures. And then, of course, if you're manufacturing, good manufacturing practices and understanding how to follow that, and just overall your processes within your business. I think as business owners, like sometimes we put policies and processes in place because something happened, right? So it's like, oh, I didn't get paid for this consultation. And I'm reaching out and I'm reaching out and I'm essentially getting played. Like this person's not going to pay me. That's going to make me think like, oh, I need a clearer procedure here.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And they are two really big pieces that you have just mentioned there. Like you started with the web of like impact, really, of education and getting the word out there. Like that's how you reach. And then on the other side of things, there's behind the scenes, the operations and like the systems, the processes, how to bring it all together and get it to actually run, even without you being at the core piece there. And these are both really important aspects, I think, of growing over the long term, because it's not just about like, doing it all at once and like then disappearing, but really that web of impact, it is something that does grow over time. And like you said, there's people who have mentioned something 7 years ago and then come back to you for advice because they remember something that you said ages ago, and it does make a huge difference. When it comes to the systems and operations, I know that this is something that is like people do struggle with a lot in really putting it all together. You mentioned that your wife is very talented in this field. Do you have any tips or advice around how to systematize or create those systems so that we can actually do this over the long term better?
Yeah, if you're more of the creative, like I love, which kind of like I'm organized, but when you compare my wife and I, it's like, okay, her organization is on a completely different level and it's great. So we have this wonderful team in which we complement each other's skill set. But I love being in the kitchen. I love formulary. I love research. I think that we need to remember, because we are building our own infrastructure as herbalists, we can extend grace to ourselves and not expect us to be highly skilled at everything, and call in the person that you need. I really think that that's probably like call in the partner that you need who is detail focused, like that Virgo energy, right? The Virgo energy, that Capricorn energy. Call in the people that you need who are extremely detail oriented, who can help you organize your data and your information, and streamline it for you. And that doesn't have to be a heavy investment. But I think once you have those structures in place, it's much easier, particularly when you're newer in business, it's much easier to scale with them, to have these systems grow with you, than it is to be like 10 years 10 years in and still doing things on paper, and now having come in and like figure out your mind. It's like, I think we can be honest with our own skill set and our own strengths and weaknesses, and call in the people who fill in those weaknesses with their strengths. So that would be my advice. Would really be my advice. It's going to be like, we use Salesforce, but we don't necessarily recommend using Salesforce to our students. When we're doing our herbal business conversations, Tammy was a developer, so she has that mind. She has that database mind. So I would ask for that help.
Honestly, I think that is great advice though, because yeah, trying to do everything yourself is not really the best way of going about it. And yeah, just calling in the right people is the strongest way of growth over time. So if that's not your strength, recognizing that and calling in the right people, like that's a great way to go about it. On the flip side, there is the web of impact that the growth kind of phase. Is there like ways that you maximize that reach, or the way that that is passed on to people, or like what sort of things have worked really well for you in the past to grow that that web of knowledge around what you do?
That's a great question. I think that it's been consistency. And it's that thing, it's that word that people to kind of, struggle with so much is being consistent. And in regards to where we, focus on our education, lots of people struggle with social media, but I accept social media as a way to reach people. And here's a story. I was listening to a podcast, and the person was talking about how they were complaining to their grandmother because they put up a video and it only reached 8,000 people. And like, if we put that in perspective of our grandparents' time when they did not have social media, when there was still maybe like the yellow pages, I don't even know, right? Like, I don't even know. And the grandmother was like, wait a minute, you put up something and you were able to reach 8,000 people and you're complaining? And it's having this perspective of like, we get to educate on these platforms and reach many more people than we can imagine, even if it's 100. Like, would you have rather made 100 phone calls, or would you have rather made this video or this piece of content and it reached 100 people? And so I take the path of least resistance and use the technology that's available to us. And with that said, it changes over time. Of course, the algorithms change over time. Like, we are going to have to adjust to how these platforms work. But one thing is, once I started, I didn't stop. And that's why people come back 4 years later, 7 years later, and they still see our presence. And they also, because we've had people say it, like, I know I've grown and matured in the work and have become a better practitioner and educator and formulator. But to have people who have come along the journey with me to also witness that is really beautiful confirmation. They're like, wow, I've seen how you all have grown in this work. And the only reason why they get to say that is because we've been consistent. And so sometimes it's really easy to kind of get caught up in the metrics of the day. Like, oh, this post didn't do well. Then this one went a little viral, and the other one didn't do well, and this one tanked. But that doesn't matter. It really is a snowball effect. And I remember, one of our own business coaches saying that when we were right at the beginning. And think about a snowstorm. It starts with one little flake. And then the next day you wake up and you have 3 feet of snow outside your door. And it's like, that's really what it's like. It's the journey of being consistent that has the biggest impact, because people are seeing that you are continually showing up, and that's building trust. One of the things that frustrates me when, because we can sometimes consider we're not in relationship necessarily with the people that we follow on social media, but sometimes you can receive the perfect message from the people that you follow that day, and you begin to rely on their wisdom, their advice later, that maybe that turns into a sale. But I know that it frustrates me when I'm following someone and they're like, I'm out. And I'm like, what? What do you mean? What do you mean you're out? Like, I understand transitions and I understand the need for care, but I also understand that we have boundaries. We can put boundaries and structures, even in our education content creation. We can put structures in place so that we don't abandon the people who are part of our community.
Yeah, that's a great point. I love the the surprise and the heartbreak that you feel when someone just drops off. That's quite relatable and just hilarious at the same time. The now that you mention it, I would like to dive in a little bit more into the boundaries as well, because consistency is one thing, but to be consistent over time, like you mentioned in passing, you do need to create some sort of boundaries to protect your own internal fire, so to speak. And so, yeah, how does that look like for you when you're creating your boundaries, and how do you kind of keep your spark inside alive?
I love this. I was just thinking about this, particularly last night with social with social media. And like I'll scroll through our past stuff and I'll remember the energy with which I created something, right? And it's like, oh, it's so fun. That's so fun. I really love being in this space where creating content, being an educator is fun. I'm sharing something that I just learned or I just did, and I'm excited about it. I want you to be excited about it too. And then there's also the post where it kind of feels like I need to put something up. And I can feel that energy too, but it's for the sake of like, I want to be present, I want to be consistent. And I think that what my overall commitment, and it's not about perfection, my overall commitment is to post at least once a day. And some this week that's not been the case. And that's okay. What I want though is in order for me to sustain that, rather, some of the boundaries that I put in place are not always commenting. Like sometimes it is a post and ghost. I try not to scroll a lot because you can really see, you can feel your own energy as you are scrolling and seeing what is popping up on your feed, depending on how you've curated it. And I will save DMs for like when I know I'm energetically ready to read them and to reply to them. So some of the boundaries that I've put in place are really around like communication on the platform because it can be overwhelming, particularly because of the space that we're in. People are always going to have the question of, well, what can I take for this or what can I take for that? And as soon as I hear that, like my mind, like I'm in work mode, like I'm in practitioner mode and my mind is going. And another boundary because of that I've put in place is that it's remembering that content and it's kind of like that's education and that's free and that's micro learning. But once I'm churning for your personal issue, that's a service and that needs to be compensated for. So if it's simple and I already have a formula that can support you in it, I'll send that. If it's really complex, and I mean, sometimes people come into the comments or the DMs with my person has stage 4 this. And I'm like, what? Sometimes people will come and say, I am at the hospital right now. What can I do? What? Like Instagram is not medical care. And so I've had to develop kind of scripts over time to gracefully respond to those people and say, this is what's appropriate. And sometimes that appropriate is like, here's the next step. Here's the link to consultation. You need to follow your doctor's orders. Like there's something that I'm going to do for you while you are actively in the hospital. But I think, again, like you were saying too, like that comes over time. That really does. You get to develop what feels good and what those boundaries are over time.
Yeah, it sounds a lot like you are intentional about building your own voice and your own platform rather than being drawn in to the platform itself, which I think is key there. So it's like creating your posts, leading the conversation, being a thought leader and like really leading with that rather than following other people's thoughts and like commenting and those sort of things there. That can be a way to like grow initially once you don't have a platform. But if you already have people who are following you, it is more important to be sharing your thoughts, being unique in that. So like really, the less time you can spend like scrolling and seeing what other people are thinking, the better, because then you are going to develop your own unique thoughts and be able to like, yeah, really lead with your unique perspective.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like to take what I've done in the day or what I'm learning in the day and bring that new information to the platform. Like I found, amber jelly, jelly roll mushrooms the other day, and I was so excited. Like being able to share that, and then to ask, like, what should I make with it? And then I put the poll up, and then I made the thing that nobody wanted. It's like that's what I wanted to make, but it's like still being able to offer based on what I'm experiencing as an herbalist in this day. Yeah.
Yeah, great. I think that makes a lot of sense. The before we get into the next like part of this session, I just wanted to check, is there any other like core pillars that you wanted to mention that you think are important for the building of a sustainable business?
I think that like we zoomed out, really thinking about the CEO, community education, operations, add consistency in there with all of the things. I think it's important to remember to figure out that there's tactics within all of them, right? So if someone is largely like in-person retail apothecary, that's very different from e-commerce or someone who is an author and has their herbal books, or someone who has an in-person school versus has a virtual school. So I think that every person is going to have individual skill building based on their business structure. And so it's remember to develop those skills. Like everyone needs marketing, but online marketing is different from in person. Like if you are really community oriented and you're doing markets and you're trying to get people to your space, or you have a retail shop, that's slightly different. So, and if you're a manufacturer, like that's slightly different. So I think a part of it is really kind of, I'm going to say it in a different way, but it's like learn the rules of your game. Learn the rules of your game. And that could also mean like I love these resources, go to your local community business centers where they offer business training for free. Like go and get mentorship in these areas. Go and like find your own online courses, find your teachers, find the books to understand the rules of the game that you're in.
Yeah, that's key, I think, education. And like you said, there are so many free resources. It's really a matter of working out what you want to learn and finding a place to learn it, because there are like in-person, virtual, like there are definitely ways to learn what you need to learn. It's just a matter of going out there and finding it, really. It's yeah, just taking that initiative and going out there. Yeah. So the next part that I wanted to cover today is really about identifying particular challenges that we might come up against, because I know from personal experience that when you're aware of challenges, it is so much easier to overcome them and make them into something good even when you can identify them beforehand. So what sort of challenges are herbalists likely to come up against, and what are ways to get around them as well? But yeah, I'll let you take it from here.
That's good. I think some of it is individual in the sense that entrepreneurship it highlights everything. It highlights so much within us. And so as an example, if we have money wounds, if we have big scarcity records it doesn't matter where they were created, right? But if we are really holding on to money wounds, then we are going to to face that. And that could look like, feeling guilty with charging, or not asking for the sale, not asking for enough, or always wanting to give away something for free, or not, budgeting, not pricing your products or your service correctly. And some people know how to save. Like, I feel like when it comes to money, like saving is a skill, holding, is a skill, investing is a skill, spending is a skill. And that's all that we learn inside of budgeting. So I think if we have those wounds, that's going to be highlighted, and that's an opportunity to strengthen that within us. And again, that could mean, that's always going to mean get the support that you need. Learn how to do the skill, because that we can't have sustainable businesses if we don't have sales, if we don't know how to budget the money. But people could also have challenges with feeling seen. Like, we, at the heart of what we do, we are educators. We are always telling people that this is a possibility. This is what it does. This is how you can use it. This is a way in which you can incorporate this work into your personal care practices, into your personal healthcare system. So you're always educating. And I don't know if many people make that connection, that as an herbalist, I'm a teacher, until they're like, oh. And so I think there can be friction with being seen as the teacher. And teacher doesn't mean that you're the expert, that you know all the plants on the planet, and like that you're an encyclopedia when it comes to plant references. It doesn't mean that you know everything. It means you're committed to the practice and you're committed to the study. But people will also, that also means that you're a channel for it as well. And so being seen in the work can be really challenging for people. That was really challenging for me. And one of the ways of just, this is why I really love the background that I had in the arts, where I grew up on stage is dancing and singing. Even though it was nerve-wracking, it's still like, oh, I had that training of being in front of an audience and sharing. And so sometimes we can fill in that skill set with something that we don't, fill in that gap with something that seems different, where it's like, maybe go take an acting class, and that will inform, that will let you be more certain when you're teaching and you're educating in your classroom, whether it's virtual or in person. And what's another challenge? I think that our own self-care can be a challenge, because we have to create so much and so much infrastructure for the business, as well as what we are doing as practitioners, and that continual study in all of these different types of disciplines, that our own self-care can just like fall to the wayside. And like, that's a no-go. We have to remember to be examples around how we care for ourselves, and like how we are still being guided by the plants and by all the other practices that we incorporate. But we have to show that, otherwise we'll get burnt out, and you can't be of service to anybody if you're burnt out. Yeah, I think that's good.
I think they're great examples of challenges, and they definitely are among the most common from what I'm experienced working with, thousands of herbalists at this point. Like, it's the pricing products, being seen, visibility, like, am I enough? All of the imposter syndrome, that type things, like that's all under that being seen. And the self-care, burning out, like those three are, like, honestly, the biggest challenges that herbalists come up against. Like, none of us want to ask for money for our services. We all just want to be able to do this work, but do it for free. Like, that's what we want to do. But we also need to live. It's the catch-22 there. And and being seen is so nerve-wracking, because if we do something wrong, if someone thinks that we do something wrong, and even if we don't, like, that's the same thing. It's like, we don't want to be seen badly. And it is so easy to fall into that trap of just doing without taking care of ourselves. But yeah, like you said, we need to look after ourselves before we can get out there. I think it would be nice to dive in a little bit deeper into the pricing aspect. So the first challenge that you mentioned, because that is something that a lot of people struggle with. And I think that I enjoy getting people's perspective on this as well. So have you had any particular lessons when it comes to pricing over the years, when it comes to either products or services side of your business? You can decide where to go with this. But like, how have you adjusted pricing or changed things over the years based on your experience?
That's great. So one, I mentioned it earlier too, was like the not getting paid. And so that helped me to establish a policy. And it was really interesting. It was a great lesson, and it was just for me, because as I relayed the story to like friends, they could easily see, it's like, Selima, you were played. Like, and I was like, oh, Was okay. So that helped me put a policy in place where it's like if we're doing consultations, that has to be prepaid before we start that initial, hour and a half long intake. So I think that helps with it. And then I also remember with pricing, with consultations in particular, I put a package together, but it wasn't clearly within that package. How many follow-ups are in this package? And there was one client, I mean, there were like nine. And so it's that voice work too, where it's like, this doesn't work. We have to be able to say, like, this isn't no, this, like, I have to be compensated for these follow-ups, right? So that also helped me put a new policy in place. This is what's in the package. And then if there's more support, this is how much it costs. And then there was also around that sustainability my own time and capacity for doing consultations. How many can I realistically do like in a month, and knowing that number and the labor that goes with that, but like it's the energy of being in someone else's energy system for so long, right? Like how many can I do and what's that price? And I remember having this moment like coming out of meditation and be like, that's like not enough money. Right. Like, and just having that honest conversation, like that is not sustainable. And so having to adjust based on that aha moment, like do the math. And that goes even into our product pricing. This is where that organization and the data and having the technology, like the database, or not just flat spreadsheets, but the database in place that it helps you know your pricing for every single thing that goes into each of your products. And that's the packaging, the label, the bottle, the box, the shipping, the bubble wrap around the bottle, the cardboard box, the stamp, like everything. And of course, every herbal ingredient, the alcohol for the tinctures, like we have measured everything and standardized all of our tinctures, standardized all of our tea blends down to the gram, down to the milliliter, so that you know how much it is costing you to produce this product. Of course, as you scale that labor, and we're accounting in our labor, like you have to put a value to your time in making this product and in making how many you can make like in an hour, however long it takes. And then you also need to be able to, the way we adjust is that we're able to return to the data. So when suppliers, spike the price of elderberry in the fall and winter because they can, well, we have to be able to account for that. So we can see what are the shifts that are happening? What are the trends that are happening with where we're supplying our ingredients from, and if they're going up? And now is a time where perhaps we need to raise prices because everyone else has, right? But the only way that we know to do that is if you know your numbers. And if you have all of that written down, and it's not just, we need to do this as a part of good manufacturing practices anyway, but it's not that one time of knowing the numbers. It's every single time you make that product, because which batch of elderberry was in there and how much did you pay for that specific bag and how much did you pay for, you know what I mean? So it's like, it's all of those little details. That's where people do get overwhelmed. And if that's not your strength, find a person who can help you fill in that gap. Because you can guarantee if you're not accounting for that money, you're not making money, pretty much. If you're not tracking it, you're not making it.
Yeah, that is definitely true. And I love that you mentioned that labor. Like it's so many people just do not account for that. Or honestly, don't even realize how much time they're spending. Like, especially when you enjoy doing something. Like this is so common for people who grow herbs as well. Like the time in the garden, just like not counting that, even though it is valid working time. Like even if you enjoy it, you can be paid for it. Like it's absolutely, yes. And the same, like people get into their element, they enjoy making, they enjoy doing it, but it's still your work. It is your profession. You deserve to be paid for it. Like it is so important. And like you can be paid for it. It's just a matter of all of us valuing our work and putting it out there into the world. And that is what I want to encourage everyone, everyone listening today. We just really do value what you're doing because it's important. Yeah.
It's like
No,
that
go for it.
value word is so important because people are, thinking that the exchange is, money for a product. And it's like, it's not. The exchange is value for value. What you offer is meaningful in their lives, and what people pay is meaningful in yours. It's value for value. It's not money for product.
Yeah, and that is a really good point because I think when we come from the seller perspective, we're thinking about like what it is or like, yeah, it feels difficult to ask for a price. But when you think about it truly as the client's perspective and the value that they're getting out of your product, it does change the way that you think about it. Like it completely revolutionizes the whole pricing process, really. Yeah. All right. So I think we have covered a lot of things in today's session and also a lot of mindset tweaks for people, I think, because these topics are really important to consider and it takes time to really internalize these messages that you're sharing with us today, which yeah, you can see that you have done that over the years that you've been working as an herbalist and sharing with people what you're doing. To wrap up today's session, I would love it if you could share with us, like, what are the three most important things that you would like herbalists who are focused on building a business to take away from today's session?
Three, well, we talked about one. One is consistency. I don't know how many times like I have to coach my own students through being consistent. And the heart, some of it is like us getting caught up in the perfectionism of if it not feeling right, it not being great yet. And what is important to me about consistency that I want to convey is that all of the improvement that you want, like the improvement in yourself as a practitioner, the confidence, of course, the sustainability within your business and your practice, all of that comes through consistency. This improvement happens when we're in motion. New questions arise that we can then, have fun discovering the answer to. And then I would also say measure what matters. And what really matters is the impact. And so we have, I keep a folder, and it's a marketing thing, but before it was a marketing thing, it was like to help me remember to measure what matters. And it's a folder of testimonials, just kind things people have said through the years. And it's like, go in those low moments where I'm feeling imposter syndrome, where I'm forgetting what really matters. I go to that folder so that I can be reminded of the ways in which I've made a positive impact on someone's life. And that doesn't mean they were always a customer or a client or even a student. That means like I said something and they replied to this email and they felt an impact from that and it encouraged and inspired them in some way. And so it's very easy. We have, especially on social media, again, these metrics of like how our content is performing, but that's not really what matters. What really matters is the education that we're putting out into the world and knowing that whoever needs to see it, who needs to read it, it's going to reach them. And if the intent and the heart is there, it's going to make a positive impact. And then I would also add recognizing when you are the bottleneck in your own business. And that could be because you don't have systems in place that will allow you to step away so that you can focus on more important tasks. That could be part of it is because we do have to create so much that it's overwhelming, but it's really recognizing when you're the bottleneck in a way, and you're holding up the process and you need to ask for help or you need to put a system in place so that these certain tasks take less time. And I'm gonna add one more, which is trust the vision. Like, again, we're a small group of people who are crazy about plants and who are brave enough to say, I'm going to go into this field in which there's no infrastructure and I'm going to figure it out because this work is important. So you have to trust that initial vision. You have to trust your calling, that this is meaningful to you. You know how important it is. And because within that vision, I deeply believe that's the promise. I'm like, I don't think the universe is like pulling a joke on us and saying, well, this is the vision, but pulling the rug under us and saying, but there's no support for it, there's no money for it, there's no this for it. Like that's not happening, right? Like knowing is no one is playing with us. This is our vision, this is our calling, trust it and follow the path and get the skills that you need to get the community and also like the partners that you need in order to make this sustainable and for it to thrive so that you can really make the impact that you're meant to make in this world.
Yeah, they're wonderful tips. I love that overarching theme of just being consistent in whatever your vision is, and you can make it happen. Like that's like kind of ties in, links those tips together. And it is like we're seeing at this conference and through your work, through so many other herbalists' work, that it is possible to actually build a career out of herbalism. And for some of the people listening today who are like beginner herbalists, it's like mind-blowing. I can do this as like a real job, but like it is possible. People like you, Selima, are doing it, and there are others out there, and it is possible, and we are helping each other to do it through this. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing your work, your story with us today, Selima.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you to all of our listeners.
Yeah, if people want to know more about you, your work, Iwilla Remedy, where are the best places for them to find out more?
We're on all the platforms. And iwillaRemedy.com is our website. And then at Iwilla Remedy on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. Those are the top three.
Wonderful. Yeah, thanks again. I really have enjoyed learning from you and everything that you have shared today. So yeah, we will wrap up now. But before we do you have any final pieces of wisdom that you would like to share with us?
Just remember that your calling wasn't a conference call. So even if there are people in your community, in your orbit who don't understand what it is that you are doing, what you are trying to do, what you aspire to do, it doesn't matter. They weren't there for the call. It's imprinted in your heart and you are fully supported in doing it.